Chapter 24. After 3 weeks, I was finally able to leave my room and move around the house. On my first evening up, I asked Catherine to read to me, as my eyes were still weak. We were in the library after the master had retired for the night. She agreed to stay, though I sensed some reluctance, thinking my choice of books might not appeal to her. I encouraged her to pick something she liked. She settled on one of her favorites and read steadily for about an hour before the questions began. "Ellen, aren't you tired? Shouldn't you lie down now? You'll make yourself sick staying up so late, Ellen." "No. No, dear, I'm not tired," I kept insisting. Seeing that I wouldn't budge, she tried another tactic to express her disinterest. She began yawning and stretching, then said, "Ellen, I'm tired." "Then stop reading and let's talk," I suggested. That only made things worse. She fidgeted, sighed, and checked her watch until 8, eventually retreating to her room, utterly worn out by sleep, judging by her irritable, heavy-lidded expression and the way she rubbed her eyes. The next night, she seemed even more restless, and by the 3rd night after reclaiming my company, she complained of a headache and left me. Her behavior struck me as odd, and after being alone for quite some time, I decided to check on her, to see if she felt better, and to invite her to rest on the sofa instead of upstairs in the dark. But there was no sign of Catherine upstairs or down. The servants assured me they hadn't seen her. I listened at Mr. Edgar's door. Everything was silent. I returned to her room, extinguished my candle, and settled myself by the window. The moon was bright, and a light dusting of snow covered the ground. I considered that she might have decided to take a walk in the garden for some fresh air. I did notice a figure moving along the inner fence of the park, but it wasn't my young mistress. As it stepped into the light, I recognized one of the grooms. He lingered for a while, watching the carriage road through the grounds, then suddenly set off at a brisk pace, as if he'd noticed something. He soon reappeared, leading Mrs. Pony, and there she was, just dismounted and walking beside it. The man discreetly led the pony across the grass toward the stable. Cathy entered through the drawing-room window and quietly made her way up to where I was waiting. She gently closed the door, slipped off her snowy shoes, untied her hat, and was about to put aside her cloak, unaware of my watchful eye, when I stood up and revealed myself. The shock froze her for a moment. She let out a startled sound and stood still. "My dear Miss Catherine," I began, too moved by her recent kindness to scold her, "where have you been riding at this hour? And why would you try to deceive me with a story? Where have you been?" "Speak." "To the bottom of the park," she stammered. "I didn't lie." "And nowhere else?" I pressed. "No," she muttered. "Oh, Catherine," I exclaimed, deeply saddened. "You know you've done wrong, or you wouldn't feel the need to lie to me. That truly pains me. I'd rather endure 3 months of illness than hear you tell a deliberate falsehood." She lunged forward, bursting into tears, and wrapped her arms around my neck. "Ellen, I'm so afraid of you being angry," she confessed. "Promise you won't be mad, and I'll tell you the whole truth. I hate keeping it hidden." We settled into the window seat. I reassured her I wouldn't scold, no matter her secret, and I had my suspicions, of course. So she began. "I've been going to Wuthering Heights, Ellen, and I haven't missed a day since you fell ill, except 3 times before, and twice after you left your room. I gave Michael books and pictures to keep Minnie ready every evening and to put her back in the stable. Don't scold him either, please. I was at the Heights by 6:30 and usually stayed until 8:30, then raced home. It wasn't for fun that I went. I was often miserable the whole time. Occasionally, I was happy, maybe once a week. Initially, I thought it would be difficult to persuade you to let me keep my promise to Linton. I had agreed to visit again the next day after we left him. But since you stayed upstairs the following day, I avoided that trouble. While Michael was securing the park door in the afternoon, I managed to get hold of the key. I explained to him that my cousin wanted me to visit because he was unwell and couldn't make it to the Grange, and how my father would likely disapprove of my going. We then discussed the pony. Michael, who enjoys reading and is considering leaving soon to get married, proposed that if I lent him books from the library, he would help me. Instead, I offered him my own books, which pleased him even more. On my second visit, Linton was in high spirits. Zillah, their housekeeper, prepared a tidy room with a warm fire for us. She mentioned that Joseph was at a prayer meeting, and Hareton Earnshaw was out with his dogs. Later, I learned he was poaching pheasants from our woods, so we had the freedom to do as we pleased. She brought me some warm wine and gingerbread. Showing great kindness, Linton settled into the armchair, and I took the little rocking chair by the hearthstone. We laughed and chatted merrily, with endless topics to discuss. We made plans for summer adventures, which I won't detail here, as you'd likely find them trivial. At one point, though, we nearly argued. Linton claimed the best way to spend a hot July day was to lie from morning till evening on a heath bank in the moors, with bees lazily buzzing among the flowers, larks singing high above, and the sky a clear, unbroken blue. That was his vision of heavenly bliss. Mine was different, swaying in a rustling green tree, with a west wind blowing and bright white clouds racing overhead. Not just larks, but thrushes, blackbirds, linnets, and cuckoos filling the air with music. The distant moors breaking into cool, shadowy dells. Nearby, great waves of long grass rippling in the breeze, with woods and rushing water, and the whole world alive and wild with joy. He longed for serene ecstasy. I craved a vibrant, jubilant celebration. I remarked that his version of heaven would feel only half alive, while he countered that mine would be intoxicated. I said I'd likely fall asleep in his, and he retorted that he'd suffocate in mine, growing quite irritable. Eventually, we decided to try both heavens when the weather was right, sealing our truce with a kiss and restoring our friendship. After sitting quietly for an hour, I surveyed the expansive room with its smooth, bare floor and imagined how delightful it would be to play there if we moved the table aside. I suggested to Linton that we call Zillah to join us for a game of blindman's buff, where she could try to catch us, just like you used to, Ellen. Linton wasn't interested, claiming there was no fun in it, but he agreed to play ball with me. We discovered 2 balls in a cupboard, amidst a jumble of old toys, tops, hoops, battledores, and shuttlecocks. One ball was marked with a C, the other with an H. I wanted the C, as it stood for Catherine, while the H could represent Heathcliff, his name, but the H-ball was leaking bran, and Linton disliked it. I consistently won, which made him irritable again, and he retreated to his chair, coughing. Yet, by evening, his mood lifted easily. He was enchanted by a few lovely songs. Your songs, Ellen. When it was time for me to leave, he pleaded with me to return the next evening, and I promised I would. Minnie and I flew home, light as air, and I dreamt of Wuthering Heights and my dear, sweet cousin until morning. The next day, I felt a tinge of sadness, partly because you were unwell, and partly because I wished my father knew and approved of my outings. But after tea, the moonlight was beautiful, and as I rode along, the gloom lifted. I anticipated another delightful evening, thinking to myself, even more so because my dear Linton would share in the joy. As I trotted up their garden path and was about to head around to the back, Earnshaw intercepted me, took hold of my bridle, and instructed me to enter through the front. He patted Minnie's neck, complimenting her as a fine creature, and seemed eager for conversation. I simply warned him to leave my horse alone, lest it kick him. He replied in his coarse accent, it wouldn't do much harm if it did, and regarded its legs with a grin. I was tempted to let it try. However, he stepped aside to open the door, and as he lifted the latch, he glanced at the inscription above and remarked, with a clumsy mix of pride and awkwardness, "Miss Catherine, I can read that now." "Remarkable," I exclaimed. "Please let us hear you. You've become quite clever." He spelled out, syllable by syllable, the name Hareton Earnshaw. "And the numbers?" I prompted encouragingly, noticing he had stalled. "I can't tell them yet," he admitted. "Oh, you dunce!" I laughed heartily at his failure. The fool stood there, a grin teasing his lips, while a scowl darkened his eyes, caught between joining in my laughter and recognizing it for what it was, contempt. I cleared up his confusion by abruptly regaining my composure and telling him to leave, as I was there to see Linton, not him. He flushed. I could see it in the moonlight, dropped his hand from the latch, and slunk away, the very image of wounded pride. He fancied himself as accomplished as Linton, I suppose, simply because he could spell his own name, and was thoroughly dismayed that I didn't share that opinion. "Hold on, Miss Catherine, dear," I interrupted. "I won't scold you, but I don't approve of your behaviour there. If you had remembered that Hareton is your cousin just as much as Master Heathcliff, you would have realised how improper it was to act that way. At the very least, it was commendable for him to aspire to be as accomplished as Linton. And likely, he didn't learn just to show off. You had probably made him feel ashamed of his ignorance before, and he wanted to correct it and please you. Mocking his imperfect efforts was very poor manners. Had you grown up in his circumstances, would you be any less rude? He was as quick and intelligent a child as you ever were. And it pains me that he is now looked down upon because that vile Heathcliff has treated him so unfairly. Ellen, you're not going to cry over this, are you? She asked, taken aback by my intensity. Hold on, and I'll tell you if he bothered to learn his ABCs just to please me, and whether it was worth being polite to the brute. I went in. Linton was stretched out on the couch and half rose to greet me. "I'm not feeling well tonight, Catherine, my dear," he said. You'll have to do all the talking while I listen. Come, sit with me. I knew you wouldn't break your promise, and I'll make you promise again before you leave." Realizing he was unwell, I knew I shouldn't tease him. I spoke gently, asked no questions, and took care not to upset him. I had brought some of my best books for him. He asked me to read a bit from one, and I was about to oblige when Earnshaw stormed in. Having stewed in his anger, he marched straight over, grabbed Linton by the arm, and yanked him off the seat. "Get to your own room," he commanded, his voice nearly choked with rage, his face flushed and furious. "Take her there if she's here to see you. You won't keep me out of this space. Get out, both of you." He cursed at us, giving Linton no chance to respond, nearly shoving him into the kitchen, and as I followed, he clenched his fist, clearly itching to strike me down. For a moment, fear gripped me, and I dropped one of the books. He kicked it after me and shot us out. From the fire came a malicious, crackling laugh, and when I turned, there was that loathsome Joseph, rubbing his bony hands and trembling with glee. "I knew he'd give you what for. He's a fine lad. He's got the right spirit in him. He knows, he knows as well as I do who should be the master there. He made you move quick, didn't he? Where should we go?" I asked my cousin, ignoring the old man's taunts. Linton was pale and shaking. He wasn't handsome then, Ellen. No, he looked terrifying. His thin face and large eyes twisted into a look of frantic, impotent rage. He gripped the door handle and shook it, but it was locked from the inside. "If you don't let me in, I'll kill you. If you don't let me in, I'll kill you," he screamed, rather than spoke. "Devil, devil, I'll kill you. I'll kill you." Joseph let out his raspy laugh once more. "There! That's the father!" he shouted. "That's the father. We all carry a piece of both sides within us. Don't worry, Hareton, my boy. Don't be afraid. He can't reach you." I grabbed Linton's hands, trying to pull him away, but his screams were so piercing that I dared not continue. Eventually, his cries were cut off by a violent coughing fit. Blood poured from his mouth, and he collapsed to the ground. Overcome with terror, I rushed into the yard and shouted for Zillah as loudly as I could. She heard me soon enough. She was milking the cows in a shed behind the barn. Abandoning her task, she hurried over and asked what was happening. I was too breathless to explain. Pulling her along, I searched for Linton. Earnshaw had come out to see the chaos he'd caused and was now carrying the poor boy upstairs. Zillah and I followed, but he stopped me at the top of the stairs, insisting I couldn't go in and had to go home. I cried out that he had killed Linton and insisted on entering. Joseph locked the door, declaring I wouldn't do any such nonsense, and asked if I intended to go as mad as him. I stood there, tears streaming, until the housekeeper returned. She assured me he would recover soon, but he couldn't handle the screaming and commotion. She took me by the arm and nearly carried me back into the house. Ellen, I was at my wit's end. I cried so hard it felt like my eyes would give out, and that brute you seemed to sympathize with stood there, occasionally telling me to hush, insisting it wasn't his fault. Eventually, when I threatened to tell my father and have him jailed and executed, he got scared, started blubbering, and ran off to hide his cowardly distress. But even then, I couldn't shake him off. When they finally forced me to leave, and I was a good distance away, he suddenly emerged from the shadows by the roadside, stopped Minnie, and grabbed me. "Miss Catherine, I'm truly sorry," he began, "but this is really too much." I lashed out with my whip, fearing he might kill me. He let go, cursing horribly, and I raced home, nearly out of my mind. I didn't say goodnight to you that evening, nor did I visit Wuthering Heights the next day. I desperately wanted to go, but I was so agitated, sometimes fearing Linton might be dead, and other times dreading an encounter with Hareton. On the third day, I gathered my courage. I couldn't stand the suspense any longer and sneaked off again. I left at 5 o'clock, deciding to walk, hoping I could slip into the house and up to Linton's room unnoticed. But the dogs announced my arrival. Zillah greeted me, saying the lad was improving nicely, and led me to a small, neat, carpeted room where, to my immense relief, I found Linton lying on a little sofa, reading one of my books. Yet he refused to speak to me, or even glance my way, for an entire hour, Ellen. His temper is so wretched. And what truly bewildered me was that when he finally did speak, it was to lie, claiming I had caused the commotion, and that Hareton was blameless. Unable to respond without losing my composure, I stood up and left the room. He called after me weakly, "Catherine!" He hadn't expected such a reaction, but I refused to turn back. The next day marked the second I stayed home, nearly resolved never to visit him again. Yet the thought of going to bed and waking up without any word of him was unbearable, and my resolve dissolved and before it could solidify. Initially, the journey seemed wrong. Now, staying away felt just as mistaken. When Michael asked if he should saddle Minnie, I said yes, convincing myself it was a duty as she carried me over the hills. I had to pass by the front windows to reach the courtyard. There was no hiding my presence. "Young master is inside," Zillah informed me as I headed for the parlour. I entered. Earnshaw was there, but left immediately. Linton sat in the large armchair, half asleep. Approaching the fire, I began in a serious tone, partly intending it to be true, there's a lad. "Since you don't like me, Linton, and believe I come only to harm you, pretending so each time, this will be our last meeting. Let's say goodbye. Tell Mr. Heathcliff you have no desire to see me, and that he shouldn't fabricate any more lies about it." "Sit down and take off your hat, Catherine," he said. "You're so much happier than I am. You should be better. Papa talks endlessly about my flaws and shows such disdain for me that it's only natural I doubt myself. I wonder if I really am as worthless as he often says. And then I get so angry and bitter, I end up hating everyone. I am worthless, and my temper is bad. My spirit is bad, almost all of the time. And if you want, you can say goodbye. You'll be free of a nuisance. But Catherine, please be fit. I believe that if I could be as sweet, as kind, and as good as you are, I would be. More willingly than being happy and healthy. And know that your kindness has made me love you more deeply than if I actually deserved your love. And though I couldn't and can't help showing my true nature to you, I regret it and repent it, and I will regret and repent it until I die." I felt he was speaking the truth, and I knew I had to forgive him. And even though we might argue the next moment, I had to forgive him again. We made up, but we both cried the whole time I was there, not entirely out of sorrow. Yet I was sorry Linton had such a twisted nature. He'll never let his friends be at ease, and he'll never be at ease himself. Since that night, I've always gone to his little parlour, because his father returned the day after. I think about 3 times we've been as merry and hopeful as we were that first evening. The rest of my visits have been dreary and troubled, sometimes with his selfishness and spite, and sometimes with his suffering. But I've learned to endure the former with almost as little resentment as the latter. Mr. Heathcliff deliberately keeps his distance from me. I've barely seen him at all. Last Sunday, arriving earlier than usual, I overheard him harshly scolding poor Linton for his behaviour the previous night. I can't imagine how he found out, unless he was eavesdropping. Linton had indeed acted provocatively, but it was really only my concern. So I interrupted Mr. Heathcliff's tirade by stepping in and telling him just that. He laughed and left, saying he was pleased I saw it that way. Since then, I've advised Linton to keep his bitter remarks to a whisper. Now, Ellen, you know everything. I can't be stopped from visiting Wuthering Heights without causing misery to 2 people, whereas if you simply don't tell father, my visits won't disturb anyone's peace. You won't tell, will you? It would be very unkind if you did. I'll decide on that by tomorrow, Miss Catherine, I replied. It needs some thought, so I'll leave you to rest and go consider it. I pondered it aloud in my master's presence, walking directly from her room to his, recounting the entire story. Except for her conversations with her cousin and any mention of Hareton. Mr. Linton was deeply unsettled, though he wouldn't fully admit it to me. By morning, Catherine discovered that I had betrayed her trust, and she also learned that her secret visits were to cease. She cried and struggled against the prohibition, pleading with her father to show mercy on Linton. All she received in return was a promise that he would write to Linton, allowing him to visit the Grange whenever he wished, but clarifying that he could no longer expect to see Catherine at Wuthering Heights. Perhaps, if Mr. Linton had known more about his nephew's temperament and health, he might have withheld even that small comfort.